Hi, my name is Ava Peters, and welcome to the second episode of my video series, PositivTea. In this series, I talk with people of the BIPOC community, but I focus on the positive while they spill all the tea. In this episode, I talk with Sue Ann Hall, who is an advisor at Indigo, so we discussed the role she plays there, and she also gives some advice on how to become a good ally. We also talk about some tips with food and nutrition. Enjoy! Well, Sue Ann, welcome to my video series, PositivTea. So this series kind of focuses more on me interviewing people of the BIPOC community, but I focus on the positive. And then the tea part is kind of my way, or the way we say kind of like um, getting all the information out
Yeah,
from
spilling the
whoever we're,
tea.
yeah, spill the tea, yes. Um, so before we kind of jump into everything else, can you tell us a bit about yourself and kind of where you're located or what do you do for a living, like, or anything else you'd like to share?
Sure. So my name is Sue Ann. I have a 3.5-year-old. I'm currently stay-at-home mom full time, and I am also an advisor for Indigo Kids. My days primarily with my son, and then right now he's on a nap, and I get a chance to do some of the other work that I like to do with literacy and around representation in children's books.
Very nice. So with Indigo, kind of how does that kind of end up working out for you? Like with like how many, like what area of Indigo exactly? Like children's
Right.
books?
So Indigo has the overall Indigo, but they also have, I guess, a branch of it called Indigo Kids. So they are kind of like they're 0 through about maybe 14. And a lot of that chunk of those books are children's picture books.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah. So um, I don't know how much you know about like literacy and the problem with getting children to read now, especially with all the advancements in tech, which is a great tool to get kids to read. Um, but Indigo has a big push with pushing like raising readers. And yeah, so I'm kind of involved in that side in particular with their diverse books and their diverse children's books. So that can cover a very, very large spectrum, but it doesn't include racialized people
Right.
and their representation in children's book, which is actually very, very limited.
Yeah,
So
I can see like things like with like Audible now or ebook that can kind of take away from, because I know for me and my sister when we were like little, it was always having the book with us, but now I guess with generations now that are coming, it's more so kind of the online more, I guess, considering that. But I always love going to like Indigo or chapters or whatever with my mom all the time.
yeah, I think that there's still a great place for that. Like if kids are reading using their tablets, like that's amazing. They're still learning how to read. Um, I think it's that when it's a replacement for reading at all, like so they're just like, let's say on their tablet watching YouTube and they're not learning anything through that. YouTube has great learning tools on it, so not to knock it. Um, but if you're just watching like kids open toys all day and
Yeah,
you're not, learning how to read or learning how to understand language, whatever language that is that you speak or speak at home, there are some problems with that. And there are some definite benefits with kids who have been exposed to books at home. There's been a lot of conversation about, I believe it's called the 5 million word gap for kids who read about 5 books a day. They go in. Did I say 5 million? Sorry, 1 million word gap. So they have significantly more words going into, I believe it's kindergarten. So all that plays a big role into like what I love. I grew up reading lots and lots and lots of books. My parents really pushed that I was reading at about 4. Yeah, I love to read, and it was something that I really wanted to instill in my son as well. Um, and so we started really, really young with him, just sitting and reading with him, letting him touch books, manipulate them, and like now he loves books. So it's awesome. I'm like really happy. I hope he continues to love them as we go on. And he does like he likes like physical books, but he also does like love like books that I get from the library that are like on my tablet and stuff like that too. So
oh,
Yeah.
That's so nice. Yeah. So does he go into Indigo with you all the time as well? Well, now
Um,
more with
not
COVID.
now, like yes, now we're COVID. But he used to, yeah, and we used to go to the library a lot. Like I think the library is like a very underused tool. They have some really great options, and they're growing in their collections. But yeah, like I would take him to the library pretty much every week. So that
Awesome.
he can like, take out some, he would choose some books, I would get some books. There's like often like programming for kids there. So
Mhm.
just to get him in the habit.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of segueing into the next area that I saw that, so for me with Rise Academy, I'm doing the food and nutrition course. And I
Okay.
also saw that you had an other account on Instagram that's all based around nutrition, which ties right into kind of my course as well, because I'm learning new things as well with this course for me. Um, and like I've been making like meals like shepherd's pie and kind of learning about like the different kind of what's it called? Like there's the diabetes and heart disease, like kind of the deficiencies that can come with eating as well. But I was looking at your Instagram feed and oh my goodness, the cake you made for your 2-year-old, like the watermelon cake, that looks
Oh, the
so
watermelon
cool.
cake. Yeah, the watermelon cake. That was time consuming. I don't know. Oh man, that watermelon cake was very stressful. I will tell you that. That one had a lot of layers. So what happened was, we had, this was before COVID, so we were having a party at home, and we were trying to make it, interesting. My kid loves fruit. So we were like, okay, we're gonna make a fruit cake. I saw one. I'm like, I can do that. That's not hard. Yeah, no, it was definitely difficult. So I cut up all these little shapes of different fruit. I think they were like kiwis, pineapples, strawberries, all sorts of different things. And the day was so busy, and I realized that like you can't pre-assemble this cake because I had other things that were in the fridge.
Oh,
So it has to be like put together live, and
oh,
it's,
right before. Yeah.
yes. And so his birthday's in the summer as well, so it can't be out too long. And you can't like just cut up a massive watermelon and like have it in big slices in your fridge anyhow. So I had all the little parts all ready to go, all the, the little cute flowers and hearts and stuff that you may have seen there. And then I just got so like overwhelmed with the fact that like the cake wouldn't stand together, like it wouldn't mount. Um, and so my husband and a good friend of mine, they got the cake to stack well because it was like it wasn't completely even. And then I went in and like kind of did that, and then like we put the two in with the blueberries and stuff, but like I was freaking out the whole time. I was like, it's not working, oh my goodness, it's not working. And I don't have like I had tons of other dessert, but like I didn't have like a plan, a backup plan for this, because I was like, this is definitely gonna work. But
Yeah.
that's what happened with the cake.
Oh my goodness. Well, did he end up enjoying it at
He
least?
loved it, and he wanted another watermelon cake for this past birthday. But thankfully it was COVID, so it didn't have to be a big cake. It was just like I got a small watermelon, and I like did, it was much more simple.
Oh,
It was
okay.
good.
But that's so I saw it and I was like, oh my goodness. I thought that you had like bought it or whatever, but then I realized like, no, this is
No, we
something
made
that you
it.
homemade.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then I saw as well you have the what was it? The apple nachos, like with chocolate and everything.
Yeah.
Those looked
Apple
good.
nachos are amazing. They are so
Mhm.
good. I'm I love them. I don't remember where I found the recipe for. It was years and years ago. Um, and yeah, they're delicious. So basically you take an apple, you slice it pretty thin. You can put, I like mine with like chocolate chip over it. You can use almond butter, peanut butter, or whatever. If you have caramel, you could use caramel on it too, or like even a homemade caramel. Like if you don't do sugar, you use like a date caramel or something, salted date caramel.
Oh,
And then it's like whatever you like and whatever you have on hand. So I usually have like almond slices, so I'll put some of those. If you really want to get like, if you really want to be filling, you could add like some walnuts. I've seen it with like people who like put a little bit of popcorn on top, like kind of
oh,
like a
that's
salty
cool.
sweet combo. Yeah, you can do really whatever you want with it, but the base is actually apples, and I think it's supposed to be like a healthy version of a salty snack.
Yeah, because I saw that and I was like, I never thought of doing that because like I always do like apple and cinnamon, like that's normally what my like after
Yeah.
school snack would normally be, but I never thought of putting like chocolate sauce or almonds, butter and stuff like that on top until I saw that and I was like, oh my goodness. And even
Yeah, well,
talking to
like
Rebecca about it too.
if you put like the apples and like a nut butter or whatever, it's kind of like, or if you're allergic to nuts, then I guess sunflower seed butter. Um, but it's a lot more filling. Like you have a protein and you have a fruit. Like
Right.
that's a good mix. And then, well, yeah, everything else you add after that is kind of decadent, but why not?
Yeah, why not?
Balance.
And so you're vegetarian as well. I will say that I am pescatarian, so I kind of fall into that category as well. Do you have any kind of recipes that you've been kind of having more recently now with that?
Okay, so let me tell you, I guess I don't label myself as a vegetarian, if that's
Oh,
fair to say.
yeah.
Um, I kind of just haven't had meat for the past couple of years. So I guess that puts me into vegetarian. I guess I eat a vegetarian diet. I don't eat fish and I haven't for many years. Um, but yeah, the switch over to no meat kind of came with my son. So when I
Okay.
found out I was pregnant with him, like a couple days after that. So yeah, he and my husband are plant-based completely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I still do like milk products and like cheese and occasionally I do eggs or like if eggs are in something. Um but yeah, so what recipes do I really like? Um I love like tacos.
Oh,
Find
yeah.
them easy to do. Um, or like making like a taco salad. So like everything just outside of the taco.
Yeah. Like the Chipotle bowls kind of in a
Yes.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are really, really good. I feel like that's like my go-to. It's not like it's less time consuming, but I would say that's my go-to. And it's not like super pricey. So if
Yeah,
you're like
because
it's
it's
I hate when things are like, people have these recipes and it's like, oh, you need to go to a store and spend like $50 to buy all these ingredients to make something. Um, so when I do like a taco salad, I usually use like TVP, which is pretty cheap. It's like textured vegetable protein.
oh,
And you mix it with water and you let it stand. And then you can like season it however you want to, like you would with ground beef. Like it has that same texture.
okay. I've
Yeah.
never heard of that before. That's
Yeah, it's
cool.
really good. And so yeah, that helps that like that's super easy. And then you throw in like whatever, if you have like tomatoes or like canned corn or fresh corn or
Yeah,
like lettuce, nachos, everything. Yeah.
that's so cool. Because I don't eat red meat either. Like I've been on that for a couple of years now, but I've always had like tofu and stuff as kind of my protein in a way. But I'll have to try that TVP. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I've
it's
never
it's
heard of
different.
that.
Tofu is cool too if you have to season it well though. Like it doesn't have
Yeah,
much taste on its own, but
yeah.
yeah.
And then you also have your Scars and Crowns account as well.
Yes.
That one
That's
I've
my
been,
primary account, I would say.
yeah.
Like I'm not on my other one that much, or I haven't been in a while. Because yeah, I do a lot of work over at Scars and Grants. It's hard to
Oh,
manage everything.
yeah.
Um, and even though I do cook, like my other account is like I cook, I plate it, and a lot of times it's like, okay, we need to cook and get it on the table and eat it. So yeah.
So what kind of role you kind of talked about it at the beginning, but what's more of your role with your blog and your role with Indigo? Like how do they kind of tie in together?
Oh, that's a good question. So when I started, so they don't tie in necessarily together.
Oh,
Well, I started Scars and Crowns because I was trying to raise some awareness to a condition called craniosynostosis. So my son was diagnosed with that when he was quite young, and it's a condition that's not super well known, but that impacts, I believe it's about 1 in 2,000, 1 in 1,800 to 1 in 2,000 kids. And they can have a pretty good prognosis if they find out pretty early. But the thing is that it's because it's not as well known as some other things, with even though it's, 1 in 2,000 is quite a few. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
some family doctors don't know about it, so they don't diagnose kids as early as they need to. So it's only maybe when like the child starts having issues that they may realize that there's something wrong. And then the
Okay.
surgeries get a bit more complicated. So I felt like it was really important to like share this information, just put it out there. Um, it was something that we had never heard about before my son was diagnosed with it. So I kind of have that on Scars and Crowns, and I was just talking about motherhood and all that kind of stuff, just putting a whole bunch of things out there into the world. I don't think I had like grand plans for it. Um, you're always like, oh, it would be nice if everyone read my blog, but I realistically knew that probably wasn't going to happen. But I did enjoy like doing that, and I found the writing for me very therapeutic, and being able to process a lot of those feelings, and just having a place to like have all that information. When we were going through this whole process, we had also come across a couple of blogs and pictures and things like that that were so helpful in us seeing like what this is going to look like, because it's like, I mean, putting your like couple months child up first, like, so what it is, it's like it's skull surgery. So they
Oh
go
my
in
goodness.
and kind of remove a piece of the skull, and then the skull has to kind of like, they're hoping that by removing it, it will grow back slowly, and the head would shape properly.
Mhm.
So it's a premature fusing of the skull as craniosynostosis, and there are different types, but um, that's essentially what it is. So yeah, it sounds pretty serious, right?
Yes,
You would
yes,
want
it
somebody
does.
to know this early, because a premature fusion means that the brain can't always grow how it needs to. And so the brain can be under a lot of pressure in there, and that can cause some issues. So
Yeah.
yes, so with all of that, and just working my way through all of that, and all my feelings about that intertwined with motherhood and everything, is kind of why I had the blog. Um, and then I was like, oh well, I should put it, link it to Instagram so people might be able to find it. And as I was doing that, I just started, sharing a little bit more, putting more of myself out there, and sort of like what we do at home, and, different things like that. And I started sharing books that I
Right.
loved reading, that we were reading at home, that maybe we had gone from the library book, or that we had in our personal library. Um, and so I continue to do that, even though I now do some work with Indigo. That's kind of me and my like hashtag. It's called, like, I call it hashtag We Reads Wednesdays, and so that's separate from Indigo. The work that I do with Indigo is kind of new, and it's really helping to boost the attention on their diverse books and diverse collections that they have.
Yeah.
A lot of publishers, given everything that happened, well, in the past couple of years, but particularly last year summer, they're really trying to um, put a lot more diverse voices out there.
Right. Yeah.
And people are looking for these types of books. And so being able to highlight them in a way, being able to highlight books that don't have a whole bunch of negative stereotypes inside of them, is part of that job. So I also like review the books, or not all of them, but some of them. And so I can provide some insight for them as well. Like, there may be a book where I'm like, yeah, no, this is not a great one, or like, I love this book so much, I think this is ideal. And sometimes those are also books that I share to my We Read. So it can go either way.
Yeah.
But yes, and then I create a top 10 list for them, that books that I'm really loving. And then they have that up on their website. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do you have any books from your top 10 that you would recommend?
Ooh, well, I mean, I think all the books on my top 10 I recommend, to be honest. Like, to create my first top 10, I was there like, oh my goodness, which ones am I gonna put out first? Because there are so many that I really, really, really love. Um, okay. I'm gonna give you two that I really.
Okay.
Can I give you two? Oh geez. Okay. I'll just give you some that I really love. So I really love The Last Up on Market Street. That's hands down, like, I love that. I really like that book. It has great messaging. It's easy for kids to understand. I feel like even though it's a picture book and it's sort of geared towards younger kids, I feel like conversations could be had on the content of that book for kids who are much older. Like I feel like 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds can have conversations about the content of that book, obviously on a different level than like a 4-year-old, but yeah, it's a solid book. One of the books that I like as well is called The Day You Begin.
Okay.
And yeah, I feel like that book should be in every classroom. It's such a solid book, and it's been translated, I know, into French, and I believe in Spanish as well. So yes, I'm going to leave it there. I know there are others,
Too.
but I'm going to pause because I like books are exciting and I can talk about them for a while. So
Yeah. Well, those are, I want to read into those too. And so as I mentioned at the beginning, so I'm trying my best to kind of become an ally to the
yes.
BIPOC community. And I noticed that on your Instagram, you mentioned something about kind of your anti-Black racism and kind of as well with mental health. And do you have any advice for me or anyone else who's trying to kind of do their part to support the work that you have been doing, or anyone else of the BIPOC community?
Ooh, the that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
You said a lot in there. Um, okay, I'll start with how you can be an ally. If that's is that good? Can I start
Yes, that
there?
is perfect.
Okay. Um, I think for a lot of people, they think that they have to go way outside of their comfort zone to be an ally to members of the BIPOC community. And I actually don't think that it's that complex and complicated. I feel like it takes a type of focused energy. I've seen a lot of people who are like, they're just running in hot and then they get very burnt out and they can't continue because they're like, it's so hard, it's so overwhelming, I can't. And my advice to people is always like, start where you are. So yes, okay, you've read a book and you're aware of the systems of oppression, great, awesome. And now you're like, what do? I want to help. So for you, you're saying your interests are in like food and nutrition, right? I would say start there. Learn about the determinants of health, learn about how nutrition and medicine and how that impacts the BIPOC community and how that differs from members of the white community, and how that works together to create these systems where people are not having the healthcare and the nutrition care that they need to thrive, right? If you're a teacher, look at the biases in education. Like, yes, you can always go into, other things and you will learn more and more outside of it, but where you can have the most impact is where you are and where you already have some knowledge. That's what I would say. I'm not saying everyone's going to say this, but I'm always like, focus your attention on where you have the most knowledge already. So whether if you're a student, that's where you're studying. If you're already in your professional career, it could be that. It could be places where you're interested in and you already have that previous knowledge and that that knowledge base, and you have colleagues and people who you can speak to find out more, and you'll understand that information a lot better. Like if I went and I started looking into details of medicine, right? It's like, I get it, but I'm not a doctor. So the way I would process that is very different. My background is in criminology, psychology, and international relations. So that's very different for me. So when I'm looking at something, sometimes I'm looking in terms of policies and politics and how that meshes together to form certain systems, right? I mean, systems are essentially politics, but that's another conversation for another time. On a day-to-day basis, how to be an ally. I would say it's important to read. So if it's like you're reading articles or books, listen. So if that's, yes, podcasts and stuff like that, but also listen when people are speaking. Listen to, like, really listen when they're giving you a view that's alternate to something that you have heard. A lot of people are they're listening to respond. So they're hearing you, they're not really listening. They're like, as soon as you say, they're like, oh yes, I remember that was so hurtful, oh my gosh, and they kind of take over before the person have had the chance to really say what they have to say and say how it made them feel. So listening, acting. So acting on, when you see something, you act, you don't wait. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to hear both sides and see, and maybe I'm going to think about, perhaps. Like, no, if you see something that's being done, that's unfair, that's somebody's being discriminated against, you need to step up, you need to say something. People will listen. Getting involved locally, if that's going to be, if there's protests, maybe if that's your thing, if it's, writing to your government officials, becoming involved in, organizations, like all that is really important. Acknowledge. So acknowledge where your biases are, acknowledges where you've made mistakes, because you know what, everyone's learning and unlearning. And we all make mistakes. I make mistakes too. Like, I think sometimes people think that Black, Indigenous people of color, they're perfect, but we're not. We make mistakes too all the time. So where we make mistakes, we also need to apologize. So that's on everybody. And then one thing is also, like, when you're uncomfortable with the situation, is not to just like jump in and react. I think sometimes people are like, you can't tell me that, you're making me feel away. It's just like, well, if I'm uncomfortable with something, that means it's something that I need to sit with and think about and process. Why am I uncomfortable? Why, like, why did that upset me? What have I learned that this is now telling me that this is something else that I've heard that's different, right? Like, I've told people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that information. Like, they never taught me this at school. And I'm like, I went to the same schools that you did. So I also didn't learn this in school, right? And so I can sympathize with that. If that's not your reality, you wouldn't have had to have learned anything else. But I know about this not because I'm like superior to anybody. It's just that, this happens to be maybe my history or my background or somebody that I know. And so or maybe something that I studied that opened this door to me, that I happen to learn these things that other people didn't. So just knowing where you're uncomfortable, sitting with that and growing from there. I would say expose yourself to different things, different voices, a lot of different voices. Expose yourself to a lot of different voices, different cultures, different people, ideas. Although BIPOC, we like squash it all together, and like there's so many different people that are included in that, and everyone's experience is going to be different. As a Black person, I know that so many people have various situations that are different than mine. We are all part of all these different groups and subgroups, and there's so much intersectionality between us, that sometimes we think that it's just one sweeping brush, but it's so much more complex and nuanced. So yeah, exposing yourself to those nuances amongst tons of groups, and learning how people are different and the same. And then my favorite, diversifying the things that you read. If you have kids with toys or you're buying them for kids, diversify your social media, your professional networks, everything. Like, it's so important to do that for everyone. I feel like that should just be a thing. Like, that should be just a thing for everybody. Everyone needs to diversify everything, because what we learn in school is just a fraction of everything. What we read in our everyday books are just a fraction of the truth. And it's not to say, like, I think there are so many different people and cultures, and the world is so rich, and we just know such a small part of it, and we base our whole life off of this small part, and we're so like convinced that we know everything, right? So the more we expose ourselves to, the more we expand our worldview, and the better understanding that we have of each other. So I say definitely diversify, like, everything. And then educate yourself. So educate yourself on current issues, things that are going on, for racism in particular. Like, think about how race can play into that, how race and gender may intersect, how like that may intersect with like a whole bunch of different things. Like once you start seeing things, like, you start looking into it in a different lens, which is good. We need to be critical thinkers. You can educate yourself, your family, on our own like histories in this country, right? I think a lot of us get a lot of American media, and we don't know about a lot of Canada's own history and struggles with, and current struggles with race and racism, and how those things come to play. So I think that's really, really important. And I would say like that's important to do whenever, not like Black History Month or Asian History Month, like just all the time. You don't need a specific time to look into this. Yeah, I think it should just, eventually the hope is that that will just be the history that we're just taught in school. Will have everybody included. But until then, your own research is good. And I would say also like look into race-based discriminatory policies. So, where, when you start looking at something like, I don't know, school suspensions, and you're seeing that there are certain patterns there, then it's like, that seems very odd that this would be happening. Why is that? And finding more details, you're going to be looking into more food and nutrition. So it's like when you're seeing certain determinants of health, it's like, well, that's interesting. I'm seeing certain patterns here with, maybe type 2 diabetes, heart disease. It's like, why is that? Why am I seeing these trends? Why am I seeing these trends with COVID, for example? What is playing into that? And it's not that there's necessarily just going to be one answer. Like sometimes those answers are very complex. They can be like, yes, health related, or things that are passed on from generation to generation, current conditions, finances, like it's super complex, but it's important that we think of these things in broad terms, and look at all the different parts, because that's how we can fix problems, is when we look at things as a whole, instead of like being like, oh, well, you know what, well, if this group has a certain problem with diabetes, then you know what, we're going to give them a food guide and it will fix everything. Well, no, it's not going to fix everything if their problem is the ability to afford that food, or the fact that people live in food deserts, right? Like that's not going to solve that. So just educating yourself on those things. So I think those are huge. And then advocating. So advocating for change where you can. So schools, libraries, social services, different levels of government, anti-bias, anti-racism training in the workplace, or for people who work in the public. Yeah, I think that should be everywhere. I feel like that's so key. But knowing that like that alone doesn't change everything, like advocating alone, and doing, sometimes, you see a government official making a statement. Well, a statement alone doesn't fix anything unless there's some policy and some movement behind it. So yeah, just, applying the pressure, showing up when communities need support. So yeah, I think that's it. I feel like I gave you a lot there.
No, that was awesome. All those.
So I could recap it for you if you want. So there's like 7 points. So read, listen, act, acknowledge, expose, educate, advocate. Did I get all 7?
Yeah, and diversify.
Yes.
Yeah.
Diversify. There you go.
But yeah, your part on listening and diversifying, I feel like with listening is so much harder now, at least with my generation. Like it's so much, everyone feels that they think that they know better than the people who are actually have been through it, or they think that by just reposting something on Instagram on their story is enough of a change for them, that they think they've done their part, and then after that they just stay silent. That's the part that I'm trying to not just do myself, and kind of make sure that I can help other voices be heard that know more than I do, because I'm just at like the beginning phase of just trying to become an ally and educate myself more. But yeah, I would say like the listening part is so much harder. It's so hard for my generation to just understand that they don't know everything, but they think they do.
I'm smiling at that because I don't think it's just your generation. I think it's many generations and many generations before you, where, and I think as you get older, you just think like you definitely think that you know it all. And I think a problem with this is that so many of us have been here and have lived through this. And they're like, well, everything was fine before. And people kind of blame it on your generations, like, and your generation has to get in their feels and feel everything and get all upset over things that were perfectly fine. And I would argue that things have not been perfectly fine. I think
No,
that people
they
just
haven't.
haven't been listening. And during the pandemic, when people were at home, I feel like just everything was, there's just so much happening all at once, and we were all watching the same things all at once. And so you couldn't really run away from it. And so you had to almost listen, or you had to know what was happening. But I think still a lot of people didn't want to listen. I think in my generation, I saw a lot of people who just shared a hashtag and then said, all right, I did my part. Um, and what I've tried to explain to people is like, my life isn't a hashtag, right? Like, for you, it could be a hashtag, and you can move along, and that is must be wonderful. But for me, it's, I can't just allow things to be a hashtag, because I'm also bringing up somebody for another generation whose life will be impacted by what I decide to do right now. And some people in my generation have kids now, and it's just like, let's think about that. What kind of world do we want them to live in? We want better. And yeah, what we inherited was better than maybe what we had previously, and better than the generations before that. Like, yes, my son can go to school. He can go to school with, a white person's child, and they can be in the same class. That's great. But that's not enough. Like, we shouldn't be happy with the bare minimum. We should
Mm.
want more, and want more for ourselves and for all of our kids, and all of the future generations. So I think it's, listening is so key. And when we listen and we hear what people really want and how we really want people to show up for us. Some people say, like, well, I've done my part, I've shared this, I'm resharing, I'm amplifying their voices, and that's good. Amplify the voices, like, for sure, share and repost and all that kind of stuff. That's really important. But when you think about how you want to help, I think when you listen to understand and not to be understood, I think it really goes a long way. Nobody's asking you to speak on behalf of the people who are being marginalized. I think it's, if you're going to stand with us, you need to hear us, and you need to amplify our voices so that people hear us who may not have originally heard us, and being able to, have those conversations with, your friends and your family, about what's going on. But you do that from really listening and getting a better understanding, and being able to relate how similar things are and how different they are as well.
Yeah. And with the point on diversifying as well, because I'm actually kind of happy about this, because I even talked to Nathan about this when I was on a
Oh, okay.
call with him. But it's, when I was in grade 9, it was still, you still read the To Kill a Mockingbird book in class.
I read that one too.
Yeah, we still read that in class. And I remember my teacher, one of the girls in my class was reading, and it came up to a part where it said the N-word in it. And and we stopped as a class, because we're like, okay, we just skip over and continue and keep reading the story. And my teacher's like, no, go ahead and read it. And I just remember everyone was in shock. And even the girl who was reading was like, I don't feel comfortable with doing that. And my teacher's like, no, it doesn't matter, just read it. But she skipped over it and just kept reading no matter what the teacher said. And I just remember all of us were like, what? So I'm happy now that that book is no longer in.
Wow. I'm kind of shocked that a teacher would say that in
Yeah.
this decade. I don't ever remember that word being read when we read it as a class. That being said, I could see why it's no longer being read.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great books out there.
Yeah. There
I'm not
are.
saying To Kill a Mockingbird is a horrible book, but there's a lot that can be read. And
Yeah.
so I'm not completely angry about
Yeah.
that.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite books, is the Hate You Give.
Ooh,
I read
yeah.
that one, and I remember watching the movie with my mom. But the first one that I watched was Selma, and that kind of,
Oh,
I remember bawling my eyes out after that
You're
one.
watching some heavy stuff over there.
Yeah. But I remember watching it because my mom, she saw it and she was like, need to watch this, because she's a very big fan of Martin Luther King and everything that he's done. So she kind of brought that on to my sister and I. And I just remember watching that movie, and she always told me after, she's like, you got so upset after watching that movie. You were like, it's unfair. It's just a different color of skin. Why are they being treated that way? Why are they doing this to them? Like, they're not different in any way. They're still human beings. Um, but yeah, I think those two movies I found really, um, really just spoke deeply to me, and like show that like things aren't okay even in like our society today. And I remember even telling my teacher about it in my English course in grade 11, and she ended up playing the movie to the class, so we got to watch it as a class. And I remember um, just everyone's reaction to all of it, and it all happening in like a modern day society was just shocking to everyone. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm still shocked that you watch this heavy stuff, but that's good. I mean, yes, you have to process it after though.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, you do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to have a good and safe space to process things that are heavy.
Yeah. And being able to have that discussion, even in my school, like within my class, was really strange to me, because we don't, people don't end up having those conversations so much with us in school. And I even remember one of my sister teachers, I was like being a student help, like student teacher helper. I don't know the actual word for it, but I was helping out in her class. But he was probably the only teacher I knew who, not just during February, but through the whole school year, did projects and everything on people of the BIPOC community, not just Black people, but everyone, and had those conversations with his class and showed those movies. And it was one teacher in like my whole school who made, not just make it Black History Month a thing, but made it throughout the whole year, not just for the month.
What grade was that?
Oh,
Or what grade
it
did he
was
teach?
he was a grade 7 and 8 teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's early. All right. That's good.
Yeah. So starting the conversations with them, but I remember like everyone loved his class and loved being in his class, and I had him as my 7 and 8 teacher, so that's why I ended up going into his class to do my course. But yeah, but it was just that one teacher, because the rest of the teachers were just doing it, only celebrating that during February and not making it a conversation with their students throughout the rest of the year. Some
Yeah.
that won't even talk about it.
I think that's February. So I'm very conflicted with it. This February was kind of difficult for me, if I'm honest. But I think one of the main things I would suggest for people who are or educators when they come to, celebrating something like Black History Month, I think a lot, and justifiably, a lot of energy is focused on um, the horrible things that were done and how the Black community has been treated in the past, and the discrimination that they currently face. All this is important. I am not going to take away from any of that, but I think what also needs to be shown is resilience, despite of excellence, joy. I think that all needs to also be celebrated, art and culture and all that. It's so important. And I think, like, for me as a Black person, I don't want people to see me and just always feel like, oh, poor Sue. Like, yes, I want you to feel a little bit of like there's obviously systems of oppression and things like that in place, for me as a Black person and as a woman. But at the same time, it's like I want you to look at me and be like, wow, in spite of,
Yeah.
like, these, like the BIPOC community is holding it down in spite of.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's so important. And it's something that we really miss when people just focus on people who have been murdered and people who have been put into prison. And that's all really important because that's all a part of it. That's all like, you know, part of things that have happened in the past that have now been put into systems that exist in the present. um, but there is still, at the end of the day, joy and resilience and Black excellence every single day, and Black history is being written every single day. So when people are just like, yeah, we learned about all these things, and I'm like, that's really nice, but I'm sure for, you know, particularly in Black History Month, the Black kids in the class learning about the enslavement of, you know, Africans for 28 days is quite traumatic,
Yeah.
or about the civil rights movement for 28 days is like literally reliving trauma daily. So it's important that that's intertwined with amazing things, because like I would hate for your generation to just think that it's just like, man, they just, it's just rough out here, which it is. And they're just people that are just filled with a whole bunch of trauma, and that's all they have going for them. And that's really not true.
No, it's not. And that's why with this whole video series, I want to be focusing more on the positive rather than just asking like, oh, what have you experienced? Like,
Yes, I get a
not
lot of that, a lot of those questions. And I get a
oh,
lot of them in my inbox too. Like, explain this to me. How come? And I must say, sometimes it does get like, I am a very nice person when it comes to my DMs, and I answer a lot of questions, and I have gotten into a lot of discussions, some of them that have taken like hours,
oh,
back and forth. But some days I do not have the capacity for that, especially with people that I don't know.
yeah, that
Um,
too.
because while, you know, a lot of people are now listening and learning, we also have our own communities that need to be supported, and that we need to, you know, that are like, this is all unfolding in front of all of us.
Mhm.
And how it impacts you is going to be how differently than how it impacts me, right? um like, I'm raising a Black son, I have a Black husband. When I see this, it hits me a little bit different, because I know that that could be, you know, it could have been my child that was mistaken one day or something like that. And so it hits me different, right? So that's trauma within our community that we are all watching, that we are all processing, while we're processing the conversations that are also coming into us. And we're, you know, trying to, you know, we're like, okay, now everyone's listening, and we feel this, okay, people are listening, we need to talk, we need to speak, we need to do all this stuff, and it's very draining. But we're like, but we have to do it because now you're listening. But then it's also like, and our communities are hurting, and we also need to support them. But then we also have our own feelings and our own mental health that we need to keep in check, and we also need to protect our own energy. So it's a lot. And so sometimes
Yeah.
you need to do like a, okay, I've done what I can here. Here are some resources. Here are some things that you can look at. Here are some people who have already done this work, like, you know, 4 years ago, that you can refer to. And I'm going to have to sit this one out.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, you know, I've seen it for some allies as well, like some people who are like in the trenches allies, not like, here's a hashtag, you know, ally, like in the trenches. They also experience this burnout sometimes as well. Um, and somebody said, rest is resistance as well. And it's something that I keep in the back of my mind when it gets heavy, that my rest is also part of the resistance. I am no useful to anybody if I don't take a break sometimes and recharge. And that was one of the reasons why Black History Month was so heavy, because usually we get to, you know, as even though we're hearing all this trauma and we're going through all of this, we get to come together and celebrate and sing and dance and like eat and drink and like love on each other and all our amazingness. And it's just like, you can't have that in COVID, right? No one's getting
Yeah.
together. So it's just like, just watching all the hashtags and the videos and the not so fun facts that people are sharing without that community. You know, so it was heavy. But
Well, for
you know, when I
sure.
compare like this past February to, you know, February 2020, and how different it was. And I was tired, but like tired in a good way, because of all the different events and things that I had been at. And, you know, reading for this group of like kids at the library. And it was like so much fun. And we did it this year, but it was virtual. So it's a little different. I don't get to see
Yeah.
their reactions and stuff. But yeah, like being in rooms, imagine being like at the NAC, like packed with like a bunch of people of color, particularly Black people, just like packed in there. it was insane. And now like I think of like being packed in a room with anybody, and I think that's absolutely crazy. I'm like, I don't ever think I want to be in that space, at least for like the next couple of years. But that was last year
Yeah.
before we were thinking about COVID, really. But yeah, so that balance.
Yeah, yeah. Even watching shows with my mom now, we start like getting all like intense and like clenched up in front of the screen when we see like these groups of people going in places now, because it's just like so, especially now with COVID, we all have to keep that distance. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I get what you mean. And yeah, going to the NIC, I miss that. I going to see like ballets and stuff. Like I had a what's it called? I had a you had tickets for Hamilton for
Oh,
the musical that yeah.
yes.
So but they've been all pushed back to like 2022. So
Oh,
probably
2022 now? Okay.
yeah, all been pushed back, but yeah, I miss it.
Yeah.
Um Alrighty. Well, I don't really have anything else. Is there
You
any
have no more questions for me?
anything else? Well, here's my last question.
Okay.
But if people would like to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yes, I'm primarily on Instagram, so they can find me there at Scars and Crowns. S is on both of them. And in my bio, I have like a link to my blog and a link to my work with Indigo and anything else that I'm usually involved in. Because I like to be involved in things like, out of the screen of socials. So if there's something that's going on or something in the community that I'm highlighting, it will be there.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much for having me, Ava. This was exciting.
this is a lot of
Nice
fun.
talking to you.
Nice talking with you too.
Okay, take care.